And welcome back to another episode of the Bleav in Georgia Tech podcast. We are your co-hosts. That is RJ Schafer. I am Jackson Caudell coming to you on a victory Saturday. Yes, that is right. We called it earlier this week, but it kind of feels refreshing to say it. We are coming in on a victory Saturday, week 0, college football season kicking off. Georgia Tech pulling off the upset against Florida State. There's nothing fluky about it, as we're going to get into it. It wasn't like, Florida State, dominated the way and just turned the ball over and Tech lucked out and got a win. Tech was the more physical team today. We talked, the line of scrimmage was the number one thing coming into today. Like, I think everybody was pretty much saying, like, it wasn't, a genius observation by us or anything. But if Georgia Tech was going to win this game, they had to win the lines of scrimmage. They had to be better than Florida State. And that was the reason most people were picking Florida State, because they thought they had the best offensive line in the ACC. They thought they had the best defensive line in the ACC potentially. After this game, none of those things are true. Now, there's a long way to go and still a good part of the season. Like, we have a lot more of the season to go. But Georgia Tech's offensive line beat up Florida State's defensive line today. Like, there is no question about that. Like, they got a couple of tackles for loss, and, Tech had some of the fumbles and whatnot. But, Florida State didn't have a sack today. They had 3 tackles for loss. Georgia Tech had 7. Like, there's a lot of things we're going to get to, try to get to everything about this game. I think just dominating the line of scrimmage, at least on the offensive side of the ball. But it was pretty clearly like Tech's defensive line did a heck of a job in this game. Like, you saw the hype surrounding Romello Height. We've been talking about him having a great camp for the past few weeks. Like, he played a really good game. He did have the face mask penalty, but he was pretty consistently getting pressure. I thought Zeke had quite a few plays. After that first drive, like, Georgia Tech never felt like they were out of position, like they were on that first drive. Like, there was a lot of flashbacks with that first drive to last year. I will admit, I got a little worried deep down. I'm like, oh no, like, as if this is what we're going to be seeing. But man, hats off to Tyler Santucci and that whole defensive staff and I think they made some adjustments, but I do think they just stuck to the game plan and just executed it a lot better after that first drive, don't you?
Yeah. No, because going into the game, we talked about this might not be what we think it's going to be. Like, this defensive line and offensive line at Florida State was really good, but Georgia Tech went out there and executed. And I think on every side of the ball, they played better than I thought they were going to. Maybe the passing game was a little bit different than I thought it was going to be.
But I just think the identity of this team is just like they run to set up the pass. Like that. Yeah. They want to pound the football, and they want to be able, because the thing is, they had a couple of plays through the air that they could have had. Like, Haynes King did miss Eric Singleton, I think was in the third quarter. He did have him open, I think, and overthrew him a little bit. You had Malik Rutherford slipping and falling on that drive in the third quarter where it looked like he was going to be open for a big play. I think it was a third down as well, and Rutherford fell down running his route. You had a couple of misses there. But, yeah, I would agree with you. Like, I guess the one thing you want to see going forward is, okay, like, are they able to pass the ball when they have to? And they did some of the time. Like, on the third down, like they hit some big plays on that touchdown drive at the end of the third quarter when they were marching down the field. They converted a 3rd and 12. They played pretty well, and they kept themselves out of that situation more often than not. And me and you talked about that as one of the keys to the game is, you can't get buried on 1st and 2nd down and put yourself in third and long too much. Like, Florida State is talented up front, and like they did take care of them today. But you saw a couple times, like, Marvin Jones, I think, had one big pressure on a 3rd and long. You had a couple of times on 1st down, where that they suffered a tackle for loss or something like that, and it set the offense back. But they were able to consistently stay ahead of the chains. I just thought that was just such a huge thing for the offense to do.
Yeah, and I thought they came up really at exactly the times that they needed to. Like, Haynes King was under pressure sometimes today. Like, it felt like he had a clean pocket a lot of the time. Felt like he could actually do what he wanted. I just felt like everything went to plan. The offensive line was much better than advertised. Obviously, Jeep Wade, Buster Faulkner have put a ton of work in this offseason, drilling in this offensive line, drilling in this new offense that Faulkner wants to bring in. And it just felt like a completely different team from last year. Last year, I thought they were really good. This year, I think they're taking another step.
Well, to me, it's a continuation of what they showed at the end of the year. And that's something Weston Franklin has talked about himself. They pretty much all talked about it. But I remember talking to Weston Franklin during fall camp saying, we really found ourselves throughout the second half of the year. And they were good the first half, but think about it, they rushed for 340-something yards on North Carolina. They pounded Virginia in a blowout win. And against one of the most talented defensive teams in the entire country, the number one team in the country, they rushed for over 200 yards in the game. And then, they basically said, forget the forward pass against UCF and just ran the ball the whole time. And they pushed them around. It's just a continuation of that. And look, if they're able to do this against Florida State's, if they're able, they rushed for 190 yards today, averaging 5.3 yards a rush against a defensive line, which I Bleav is talented, and I talked about it, during the preview. But Pete Thamel was on College Game Day saying they got 4 top 100 picks on their defensive line, and maybe they do. I don't know. That'll be an interesting thing to see, because Florida State could just wreck everybody else's offensive lines this year, and it just means the Georgia Tech offensive line is really good. But I think that is one of the biggest takeaways in this game, is just this offensive line is as good as we thought it was. And they should be better than most of the teams they play, even though they play a super challenging schedule.
Yeah, and I think when you have an offensive line like that, it opens up for you to do so much on offense. Like, I absolutely love the play calling, what really started in the first quarter. Like, you have that Malik Rutherford 40-something yard screen, Eric Singleton jet touch pass, Zach Pyron on the goal line, which we didn't know that was going to be a thing until early up until this game. There was so much to deal with for Florida State.
I'll just interrupt you real quick. There were a few times they did this last year. I'm pretty sure they did bring Pyron in to run it. And I texted somebody during the game, and I'm like, Pyron's a really effective runner. He's good. It's just like when running those kind of plays, you're expecting like a Cam Newton-esque, like physically built player like that. And it's just like, and Pyron gets the job done. Like it's effective. They use it.
Yeah, and it amazes me too, because Haynes King is such a very physical runner. Like, he's a great runner in and of itself. So, not that I question Buster Faulkner, because he knows beyond what I know football knowledge.
Buster Faulkner's forgotten more about football than either of me or combined. Like, that's just a fact.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder why we go to Zach Pyron, but I'm not questioning it. He's an elite runner. So is Haynes King. Really, anybody you put in the backfield. Like, even Chad Alexander looked great tonight.
Yeah, and we'll get into that. I think that's something we really do need to talk about.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's one of those things. If it works, okay, yeah, that works. It's great. And then you're kind of bemoaning it if it didn't work, and you're like, oh, what the heck is he doing in there? But look, if it works, it works. I guess let's take it from the top, and let's just kind of go drive by drive almost. Like we don't have to go 30 minutes on every drive, but just kind of what we saw and kind of what we were feeling throughout the game. So me and you both said during our preview, when it was just me and you, after Austin left the other day, Georgia Tech, if they win the toss, they should take the ball and try to go score as quickly as possible and try to play from in front. I was surprised when they did win the toss and they deferred. And that's what a lot of teams do. They want to get the ball coming out of the second half. I was just worried if FSU gets it, looks the way they actually did on their first drive. I was worried, okay, if you don't respond on offense, this could that's how things can start rolling downhill. And it looked like it did. I'll be honest, I did get a little worried after that first drive. Florida State just took it right to Georgia Tech. Right from the opening play of the drive, they were running the ball really well. DJU was hitting his guys pretty quickly, and that's when they had success. It was when he was rolling out and hitting guys very quickly. When he would get guys in the flats or get open, we won't discuss him too much because he doesn't play for Georgia Tech, and this is a Georgia Tech podcast. But like, I would be worried if I was a Florida State fan of them not being able to throw down the field, and him not being able to do that. Like, because they really didn't. Like there was a couple times, the fourth downs, we'll get to a little bit later in the game, but for the most part, like they were not able to throw the ball down the field. You got to give the defense a lot of credit, but just kind of what was your impression just of the first drive when FSU seemingly just very easily kind of bullied Georgia Tech down the field and went up, and then like Mike Norvell was feeling himself too up there in the start of the game. Like they went ahead and went for 2, and I was like, man, they're jacked up about this, and they lost that energy so quick.
See, and I think that they knew they would need that heading into the game. Like I think they knew they needed to come out quick, score fast. I'm with you in total honesty. I was worried after that play because they looked really good. And honestly, I think that was their best drive all game. I don't think any other drive after that touched what they did. Completely effortless. Honestly looked like they were exposing the defense.
Yeah.
But I think it was just the perfectly crafted drive.
Yeah. And like we were saying earlier, like I don't think Tyler Santucci, he certainly made adjustments, but I don't think it was a wholesale. Well, the game plan was terrible. They adjusted on the fly and they did really good. I just think they executed their game plan a whole lot better because the first drive was as bad as you wanted it to be. That was the absolute worst thing you could have saw as a Georgia Tech fan, that first drive. But just the fact that they were able to bounce back from that, because look, we'll get into the Georgia Tech's first drive right here. They scored maybe even more easier than Florida State did. Yeah. I mean, I know that's maybe bad grammar, but Jamal Haynes rips open a big run. You had Eric Singleton then go for a first down. Malik Rutherford takes a quick catch, 42 yards. The thing that play and other plays in this game is, I know Georgia Tech has not recruited as well as Florida State has, and has not gone through the transfer portal as well as Florida State hasn't gotten ranked guys. They looked faster and as physical as Florida State did. That was when I noticed it. And right after that, and then they score the touchdown with Pyre, and I'm like, okay, game on now, because when it was Florida State's first drive, it looked like they overwhelmed Tech, and then it's like, okay, it's fine. Like, hey, we're just as physical as their offensive line is. We're just as fast as they are. And it was a great drive by Buster Faulkner. Like, there's no other way to say it. Like, he came out with a great script and just took it right to Florida State. Like, they had nothing on that opening drive for Georgia Tech.
And I thought after this drive, like, maybe this is the identity of the Georgia Tech offense this year, because you had the screen pass to Malik Rutherford. He went down, got a ton of yards, upwards of 40. And we just saw so many different things experimenting that we didn't even see last year. And I think the offense looked really good. You get your guys open in space like Eric Singleton. You find a way for Haynes King to make plays. This was by far, I think, one of the best starts offensively to a Georgia Tech game, over the past couple of years, because they only scored 3 times on the first drive last year. And that seemed to be a struggle. Georgia Tech completely flipped the script on that.
Yeah, and that was a stat I'd actually kind of forgotten about. Like, as good as the offense was last year, like, they really didn't start off a lot of games well.
Yeah.
Because, remember, they put up a gazillion yards on Louisville in the first game last year. And then I remember the first drive was an interception, wasn't it? Like, there were so many games you could go back and look at where they didn't start off well at all. But a great job after that. Florida State gets the ball, still in the first quarter, about 7:26 left. They do drive it down a pretty good bit, and they got down in Georgia Tech territory. And I think, like, maybe one of the forgotten plays now, I'm sure you remember it, but on the first down, freshman running back Cam Davis looks like he has a lot of room to go if he catches the ball and just flat out drops it. Like, early on, you could tell Mike Norvell was trying to get DJU outside of the pocket and try to hit guys on the run and just try to get the ball out quickly. And he had freshman running back Cam Davis, and he just dropped the ball flat out. And then I want to get your take on this too, because third down, Florida State doesn't get it. They get called for holding. Brent Key declines it. And I think some people say, well, obviously it's fourth down, but it was like 4th and 5 or 4th and 6. Like it wasn't like it was 4th and 12, like an easy just decline the penalty. I kind of was advocating for him to take the penalty and force a 3rd and long. Like, yes, of course, obviously it turned out to be the correct decision because Florida State didn't score. But I thought you could have pushed them out just further out of field goal range. And I know Florida State wound up going for it. They didn't get it. A great tackle by Amari Harvey, who really tackled well in this game. I thought that was something that shouldn't go overlooked. But, yeah, what was your take on that decision, which was, again, obviously correct now?
Yeah, I think we talk about this a lot with Brent Key because he is a unique decision maker. In the moment, I was actually I was on the same page as you were. I was saying take the penalty because then it's 3rd and 14 instead of because it was 4th and 4, and you don't really, especially with an offense like Florida State, where they are really good in the short game. I kind of thought it was a no-brainer to take the penalty. Anyway, turns out to be the right decision. Amari Harvey, that tackle was ridiculous. I think that's when the tide started to turn.
I was surprised Florida State didn't run the ball.
Yeah, me too.
At that point, like I know Georgia Tech adjusted and did well throughout the rest of the game against the run, but that right after that first drive, and they were continuing to move the ball a little bit in that second drive. I was a little surprised that was the call that Norvell made in this game. So the next drive for Georgia Tech, right after they hold Florida State, like this might have been their worst drive of the game. Maybe I guess they had one other kind of bad one. Jamal Haynes gets tackled for like a loss of 6, and that again, we said they had to win the early downs. When they won the early downs instead of the chain, they scored touchdowns. When they didn't, you had a drive that went 0 yards in 3 plays because they did get some of that yardage back, but they did have to punt the ball right back to Florida State. The game was still 8-7. I don't really have any takeaways from that drive. Do you? I mean,
yeah, no, we kind of saw it earlier. Like we saw a similar drive later, but I just hope it's not indicative of things in the future. I don't think it's anything to read into, honestly.
I don't either because again, this Florida State defense is good. Like they did get some stops and get some wins in this game, and then Florida State does get the ball back towards the end of the first quarter. They take about 5 minutes off the clock, went into the second quarter, and they settled for a field goal. They went 8 plays, 41 yards, ended with a field goal. They go up 11-7, and then Georgia Tech had. They did so well towards the end of quarters scripting things up because they go nearly an 8-minute drive, 14 plays, 75 yards, and this was their 3rd drive of the day. It was their first of the day, but they would have 3 drives today with double-digit plays, and they just pounded the ball right down their throat. I mean, there's nothing else to say about it. Like, because again, Haynes King was not really throwing the ball. Like outside of that 42-yarder to Malik Rutherford to start the game, they didn't really hit anything big in the passing game. Jamal Haynes was fantastic today, and they went down there and scored right towards the end of the half.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it's like people are starting to worry about Haynes King. Like, no, that was just the game plan heading into the day.
There's a lot of games he had like this last year.
Yeah.
With these same kind of statistics, like they love to run the ball with him and Jamal Haynes, and then they're going to try to beat you deep with their guys. Like that's
like if he would have connected with it, I mean Eric Singleton, this could have been a different scoring game because that play would have been huge. But this drive in particular, like everything was moving. Like Chase Lane got open just in front of the first down marker, got the first, and I think Haynes King was a lot more. Trying to think of the word, like reserved in this game. He was not trying to force passes. He was going through his progressions. He looked really patient today, and I think it helped the offense succeed because there was a lot of things that went well on offense.
Yeah, I agree. Like he really didn't take a ton of chances there. Now we will get into a little bit later. I think they mainly occurred in the second half. The fumble issues there, with the handoffs, the mesh points, just whatever. That's something that really does need to be addressed because There's a couple ways this could have gone totally different if Florida State hops on the football, and we'll get into that. But Florida State gets the ball. I thought Mike Norvell absolutely botched the end of the first half game management-wise, and I generally regard him as a coach that knows how to manage those situations well, knows when to go for it, knows when to be aggressive, knows how to use the clock. But I thought he did a really poor job. They just were letting a lot of clock tick off, and I didn't think they were trying to push the ball. They weren't even trying to run the ball, really. And you got lucky that you had the questionable Miles Brooks pass interference call on that final drive. If you don't have that, you don't get in field goal range. And look, hats off that Florida State kicker, by the way. He absolutely nailed a couple of 50-yarders today, including that 59-yarder before the end of the half. But it was tied 14-14, and I think if you were Brent Key and Georgia Tech, you would have easily taken that first half coming into the day.
Yeah, I wasn't very impressed at all with that drive.
No.
DJU, we kind of knew what he was going to be, but that was really the drive where it was like, okay, short throw, negative throw. Because at the end of the half, he had negative air yards. Like, most of his passes were behind the line of scrimmage. And, I think I will say, even though Florida State did score, I think Romello Height looked really good on this drive. Like, he probably had 3 quarterback pressures.
That's another thing we should miss. That was a face mask drive, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I thought it was.
That was the one.
I'll have to go back and say that this is terrible podcasting. But, yeah, I just thought that they didn't even try to do anything to try to advance the ball. It just looked like, hey, we don't want DJU to screw this up. We're going to try to get into the half tied, and look, they did. To their credit. But I just thought that they were going to try to push the ball down the field a little bit more than they did. But so coming out after halftime, Tech got the ball. Jamal Haynes busts a big run. And then they get set back a little bit due to one of the fumbled exchanges from Haynes King. There was a couple times that I thought that he carried the ball a little loosely, and either when he was handing off, doing the options, the mesh points, I just thought it just never looked clean sometimes. And that's obviously something that's pretty easily fixable. It's not really something that's a talent issue or anything. They drive down. Aidenburg attempts a 51-yard field goal, just misses it a little bit to the right. It wasn't a horrible wide right miss, but came up short. And Florida State definitely had a little bit of momentum there, and it felt like a little bit of a missed opportunity for Georgia Tech to kind of get the lead back and kind of cement themselves to start the second half.
Yeah, and especially because that drive started. That was the drive where Jamal Haynes started off with a 40-yard. 36-yard run to start the drive. There was a lot of momentum for Georgia Tech going into this drive. Obviously, tie game at half. You get the ball, you can take the lead. It just didn't happen, but the game still worked out the way it did.
Yep, and then both teams, the next 3 drives were pretty just kind of gross by both teams. Florida State went six plays, 22 yards, punted. This was actually the worst drive of the game for Georgia Tech. They went three plays, 2 yards. And look, they only had 2 bad drives literally all game. Yes, every drive didn't end in points, but there was only 2 drives where you could really question, hey, what were we doing here? And just where Florida State won. And then Florida State goes 6 plays for 11 yards. But then, to end the third quarter, going in to the fourth quarter, Tech had another just huge drive win. 11 plays, 89 yards scored, and man, Haynes King had that was a gritty drive. Gritty is a word that is overused in football a lot. He was taking hits, he was running physical. They were going to get the ball in the end zone, and they wound up punching it in on that drive and taking the lead. And a lot of that, all the pressure, then that's when it really started to creep in on Florida State, I think.
Yeah, and that drive was so huge because if you don't score that drive, maybe you go down. That was absolutely huge. And I think that was the drive where I think Haynes King put himself on the map because play after play after play, there was obviously the big QB draw. That was the big play that you take away. But even small plays, avoiding avoiding a sack on third down, finding somebody open for the first down. He just showed again and again, like he's a magician, really.
Yeah, and
he made so many good plays that drive.
Kind of going off one of your points there, something that irritated me today. Look, I know Georgia Tech is an underwatched team. I know a lot of people just kind of casually. I don't know why it just was getting under my skin when people were like, I just can't believe Georgia Tech's offense. Look at them go. Like, they're dominating Florida State up front. Their offensive line looks good. Yes, they led the ACC in rushing last year. Like, I don't know what about this is surprising. Like, I thought that they were going to have a good day. Like, I thought they were going to do – like, I expected Florida State to be able to run the ball better. But one of the reasons I picked Georgia Tech to win was I thought their offensive line was good enough to negate all of the talent that Florida State's defensive line had. So that was just a little something that was getting under my skin. Just the Haynes King has to put himself on the map after he led the ACC in touchdowns. Like, that is insane to me. Like, and again, I know he's not perfect, like, and everything, but just the way Georgia Tech plays, he's perfect for what they want to do.
And I think people, if I have something to say here, people kind of treated Haynes King as like a lesser version of DJU. Like, I don't know if you saw this throughout the game.
That is
like,
an excellent point.
DJU would make plays, and then Haynes King would make plays, and they'd be like, "Oh, Haynes King is looking like DJU out there." Haynes King, in my opinion, and we saw that today. Like, he proved to be a better quarterback than DJU. I just think people have to start respecting Haynes King because we have been on the Haynes King hype train the entire offseason.
And again, I know he's not perfect. I really know he's not perfect. He is not a first overall pick in the draft. He is not a top 10. He's not a first-round quarterback. I will willingly admit that. But he was the best quarterback coming into today's game.
Yeah.
Like, we both said that. Like, Georgia Tech, and really, I think he is the best quarterback on the field, even against the other teams they play, probably until they play Notre Dame. He's better than anybody on Georgia State. He's better than Kyle McCord, in my opinion. He put Haynes King on Ohio State's offense last year. Let's see what he did, but I don't want to get off too much of a tangent. He's better than anybody on VMI. I think he's better than Tyler Shuck at Louisville. He's better than any Malik Murphy at Duke. He's better than anybody on North Carolina. So, like, Georgia Tech's going to have the best quarterback in a lot of the games they play this year. So, but getting back to the game, and then Florida State responds. Like, I have to give them a lot of credit because I really thought there was a couple times when there was a couple of fourth down conversions. Georgia Tech's run defense just really we cannot undersell how well they played after that first drive. And the run defense specifically, like, the pass defense was pretty good most of the game. Like, there was no big busted assignments. Like, I was worried if Florida State ran the ball so well, like Norvell was going to be able to scheme some of those receivers open, even though, like, it really showed it. Florida State's receiver room, they got a lot of things they got to figure out there. But back to what I was saying, they converted a couple of huge fourth downs, and when they scored, I was worried a little bit that, man, did Tech miss the opportunity to shut the door on them? Because Florida State took a ton of time off the clock, and that last I think it was a 4th and 9 there in the red zone. I thought if Tech stopped them, I was like, man, the way that they're scoring and running the football and able to move the ball against the Florida State defense, they could put the game away. Like, it's over. Yeah. Like, you win the game. And they didn't do that. So I was interested to see how they would respond. And they responded how you should expect Georgia Tech to just respond to that. Like, they just in a tough way. Like, they came out 12 plays down the field on the last drive, and Haynes King leading them down the field. Now, when they got down there, I hate it when college coaches, no matter, like, Nick Saban's done this before, right? You know, it cost Ryan Day, I think, a playoff victory against Georgia a couple of years ago. When they get down on the opposing territory, and then it's, okay, play for the field goal. Let's go. Just run it a couple times. Let's play for the field goal. And again, Aiden Burr is a good kicker. He had a good year last year. You just don't know how – you have to wonder how kids are going to react in those situations. Like, that's a lot of pressure on you. And then if you go in there and you miss it, look, overtime probably favored Florida State. Like, I'll admit, like, yeah, you needed to go in the game right there. I do question that a little bit. Look, it worked out. I'm not going to nitpick here too much. But after the fumble there that I thought was really going to take Georgia Tech out of it, like, and you got to give a lot of props to Eric Singleton for getting them back into decent range there. Getting some yards. But get down there, and then Aiden Bird hits the field goal. I won't say he nailed it because there was a part of me when I saw him kick it I was wondering.
I thought he missed it.
I thought it was going to drift a little bit to the left. To be perfectly honest with you, it was. He nailed it though. Like that, I'm not going to overanalyze this at all. He nailed it. Georgia Tech won. They start the year off 1-0, beating the defending conference champions, and Florida State had not lost an ACC game since 2022. They didn't lose an ACC game last year. The only game they lost all last year is to Georgia in the bowl game, which I personally don't care about. That game was just kind of circumstances surrounding it were kind of weird, but. This was the first ACC game they had lost in quite a while. I'm trying to remember who was the last team to beat them. I feel like I think
it was Clemson.
Was it Clemson? Was it NC State? So.
Could have been. It's either one of them.
Anyway, that doesn't matter. But yeah, just I think we've talked about all the ways this means. It's just this program over the past month or so, especially in recruiting, the way they finished last year, has been gaining momentum. I think not everybody was quite bought in. And I'm not saying this doesn't make Georgia Tech a national title contender. This doesn't make Georgia Tech the front runner in the ACC now. There's a lot of games left to be played, but it shows Georgia Tech's a lot better than most people think. That again needs to be a key takeaway, I think here. That they're a lot better. And look, I do think after winning this game, they're going to have to keep showing it, but I think they have a shot to get there. Again, take it game by game. You need to handle your business starting next week against Georgia State. But the two toughest games that Georgia Tech will probably play the rest of the year are non-conference games. Yeah. And they still have tough ACC games. I'm not saying they don't. But I do think you can paint a picture to where they could have a path to Charlotte.
Yeah, and I think what you talked about, I'm going to go back a little bit on what you said. I think what you talked about, Brent Key, decision-making wise, I want to make a comparison. I think he's like the Dan Campbell of college football.
Yes, that is an amazing comparison because I've thought the same thing.
Because I kind of thought that after the game when they were interviewing him and they were talking about, how does it feel as a former, lineman to see guys competing up front? And he's like, are you kidding me? That was the best thing I've ever saw. And he makes decisions. I am fully trust 100% Brent Key. We've had coaches in the past. I haven't had full trust in them. And I
don't know how you could as a Georgia Tech now. I'm not a fan. I cover the team. I report about the team. But I don't know if from a fan's perspective, how you could just not completely trust, what he's selling. And he's backed it up. It's
complete turnaround.
Ranked ACC teams.
Yeah.
They've won 6 of their last 9 ACC games. One of the losses was a blown 15-point lead to Louisville. One of them was the bad Haynes King game against Boston College. And then, he had an ugly game against Clemson, but the Clemson game is the only one where they really didn't have a chance to win. They are very competitive in ACC play, which, again, should bode well, but you have to take care of business because that's the thing. Winning this game is huge. There are 11 games to go, and there's plenty of tough games on the schedule. And I think, do you have any more key takeaways or anything you wanted to hit about this game, or, do you want to kind of look forward here to the next week?
The one thing I do want to touch on, my only worry after this game is the defense kind of on 4th, 3rd down. I think that was the only weakness. I just want to see a little bit more pressure, better press coverage, because it seemed like Florida State kind of had their way on 4th down all throughout this game. Other than that, everything about this offense, this defense, special teams maybe isn't perfect, but I think everything looks great.
And again, there's nothing fluky about this. Yeah, they outgained Florida State 336 to 291. Yes, FSU had more passing yards, but and another thing that was kind of underrated is Georgia Tech only had 3 penalties today. They didn't do anything stupid. FSU only had 1. FSU had 20 first downs to Georgia Tech's 18. Tech was 5 of 9 on 3rd down. Florida State was 5 of 12. Yeah, you're right. Florida State was 2 of 3 on 4th down.
Yeah,
but Tech averaged 13.3 yards of completion. Florida State 10.2, 5.3 yards per rush. they held Florida State to 3.2 yards a rush. Like, that is outstanding. Like, coming into this game, like, everybody was talking about how Florida State was going to run the ball. I thought they would do better than they did, but I did think Georgia Tech was going to be able to do enough because while I still think they need to keep upgrading the talent and recruiting well, you can't underrate how big of an upgrade they've had in coaching.
Yeah.
I think Tyler Santucci is far and away better than any coach they had on the defensive staff last year. Jess Simpson, I think, is a big upgrade. I think Corey Peoples and Kyle Pope are big upgrades. Like, having better coaching just goes such a long way, and I think this game just proves it. Like, yes, Georgia Tech still has a little bit ways to go in terms of the talent acquisition department, but the coaching today I thought was tremendous.
Yeah, in all of the problem areas where we thought Georgia Tech could struggle, like especially against the defensive line, like that was the biggest question mark heading into the game because this defensive line was looked at as maybe one of the best in the country, if not the best in the ACC. You know, I think Georgia Tech showed the peak of what this team could be because there's some really high level talent on this Seminole team.
Well, and see, that's the thing is, like, I don't think this all of a sudden means Florida State's defensive line was overrated or stinks. I
still think they're very good.
Defensive line is really good.
Yeah.
And if anybody had been paying attention, I tweeted it out after media days. The fact that not one person off the ACC's they returned 4 starters from the top rushing offense in the ACC, and the fact that not one offensive lineman was first team was I thought it was a joke. Like, and I'm not. I said at the time, I don't get mad about media days. It is what it is. I just thought that was ridiculous, and I think that this game proves it. The fact that Weston Franklin or Joe Fusal or anybody did not get a better look for first team All ACC, they should now. Time of possession was basically a wash. Nobody turned the ball over, although Georgia Tech tried a couple times. Like that to me is like one of the top things that has to get cleaned up from this game. I'll have to go back and watch the game again to kind of see maybe what was the issue. I just thought a lot of the times it was on those mesh points, whether it was an option play or something like that, and maybe there was some miscommunication between the quarterback and the running back. I don't know. I just have to go see it again, but that has to get cleaned up because you're not always so fortunate like they were. But they had twice as many tackles for loss than Florida State. Like, if you'd have read these stats to me, I'd told you, Georgia Tech's probably winning that game.
Yeah. I think it's a complete night and day difference from what we saw last year. Run fits were absolutely amazing.
They're great.
Romello Height, he looks even better than advertised, really.
Kyle Eford did too.
Yeah, Kyle Eford was great. LaMiles Brooks. Like, there are so many standout players that you can say played really well. Amari Harvey, too. He made a ton of humongous tackles. It's just
Tajay Butler, I think somebody that needs.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't play every snap, of course, but he had a tackle for loss. Like, me and you were high on him when he signed. I think he's gonna play as the year goes on.
Yeah, and I like Tyler Santucci's defense a lot. Like I think this defense can really surprise some offenses this year.
Yeah, and I think one thing going forward I do want to see is, we said this before the game, the Florida State passing attack I just don't think is very good. Like, I try to give Mike Norvell some credit. He does some good things, especially coaching quarterbacks and getting the most out of offenses. I just think what DJU is. Like, Malik Benson couldn't really get on the field with a decent to subpar receiving core in Alabama standards last year. Jalen Brown, he didn't really ever play before. Keegan Williams was out this game. I don't really know what to think about him. Ja'Kai Douglas, he's been around for a while, but he's never really produced. So I think I do want to see the secondary and defense play a better passing attack before I give them just rave reviews. But I think the run defense is the top thing you can take away from the overall defensive performance today. Was just, I do think as the year goes on, you'll see Florida State will run the ball better against teams but the fact that they were able to perform this well, I think would give you hope, because I don't think they're going to play an offensive line this good until they play Notre Dame. And the thing is, Notre Dame's left tackle is out for the season, and they're already replacing 2 NFL draft picks. So that could TBD. It might be Virginia Tech or Miami has the next best offensive line they play.
Yeah, and I don't really I don't see Roydell Williams having a game this week again. Like he
I
averaged
don't know
3.2
because
yards per carry.
yeah, don't mean to interrupt you, but I think I don't know. And again, this is not a Florida State podcast. I don't want to get too deep into this, but like I wasn't super impressed with him after all I've heard about him. You know, he didn't really do much at Alabama. I didn't know if he was an upgrade over Trey Benson. Anyway, we talked about that on the Thursday pod.
Yeah.
And again, we have to see how these things play out because again, week 0 can be strange sometimes. That's the number. That's one of the things Georgia Tech has to keep improving on. Is like you got to go take care of your business next week against Georgia State. We've said it all offseason. We thought this game was going to be closer than most people thought. We picked Georgia Tech to win. I want to see how they come out next week. Georgia State, I don't think is any good, but you're coming back from a long trip. You're going to get a whole. This is the only real big game today. I know SMU is going to play Nevada later. They're going to kill them probably. This was a game everybody had their eyes on today. Everybody's going to be loving on you for the next week. Like, just plain and simple. Everybody's going to be giving you props for the next week. How do you handle that? You know, because after the Miami game last year, they came back and stunk versus Boston College. You know, they have to be able to handle success. They have to do it consistently because this is the worst outside of VMI. This is the worst team you'll play all year by a pretty good bit. This is one of the only games on the schedule I just look at and say they should go out and just dominate them from start to finish.
Yeah, and well, I'm going to say this while I get a chance before I forget. I'm going to say I predicted this game pretty well. Looking back to last podcast, I said 34-21 or 34-31 Aiden game winning field goal. I'm going to take that as a win. But diving into Georgia Tech's future, I don't think this doesn't make them front runner in the ACC like you talked about. I just think it's huge because now you can compete against high-level teams. Like, you can compete against Notre Dame, compete against Georgia, compete against all these teams who, maybe the spread is going to be big, like heading into the Notre Dame game.
I don't know. I think that game's about to be up, too.
Yeah.
Georgia maybe just because Georgia, talent-wise, is just on a little bit of a different planet right now. But again, it might be useless talking spreads right now for future games. I'm sure people are like, what are they like? Why are y'all talking about that now? But like, I don't think the only game I think they'll still be a double-digit dog in the rest of the way is the Georgia game because I have a hard time seeing them being a double-digit dog to Notre Dame right now. Because I mean, is Notre Dame that much better than Florida State? I don't know. Maybe.
And I think it's possible that like, you might be favored in some of these games late in the season. Like you could be favored against NC State. If you talk about beating some teams, like if you go out and beat Miami, again, I'm not saying I don't think Georgia Tech goes undefeated this season. I'm sorry to everybody that thinks Georgia Tech is 12 national champions.
Right now.
I think you can win a lot more games than people think. Like the 5.5 win total, I don't think it's unrealistic to say, Georgia Tech can find themselves
in a lot of places. I think you're definitely on a pace to definitely beat that out now. But yeah, you're going into a stretch of games where a lot of the games are very winnable. Like Georgia State is a very winnable game. Syracuse, it's a road trip, very winnable game. Like I think Tech probably is favored in that game. VMI is, whatever. Like just get out of that game healthy, you'll win. They could be 4-0 heading into that game against Louisville, and that's going to be another big test. It's on the road. It's another ACC game. It'll be your third ACC game in the opening month of the season, or first few weeks of the season, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, just they have to keep the main thing and stay focused. Like just go out and Brent Key talks about it's a different opponent every week. They have to go out and beat that opponent every week. Like the Florida State game is over now. You beat Florida State. Like enjoy it on your flight back. Live it up, but got to start focusing on Georgia State and then the things they have to take care of. But did we cover everything? I think we did.
I think we did. I'm just gonna say you can't slouch. Like you have to take everybody seriously. But I think it's very possible.
They've played the underdog role well.
Yeah.
They should have people's attention now. If you didn't already, I thought it was ridiculous if you didn't already, but they should have people's attention now. And like, there's not going to be many games where you're going to catch people off guard.
Yeah, and I think the way people were talking about Georgia Tech before the game, like I felt a little bit disrespected, I guess, because a lot of people were saying Florida State was going to win this game by 1,000,000. That was never going to happen.
How smart! Like Nick Saban is the greatest coach of all time. He was one. If he would have just predicted Georgia Tech to win, he would be like he would just be the coolest kid on the block right now, because
that's what I'm
all
saying.
he did was talk about how good he thought Georgia Tech was. He turned around and picked Florida State. Like, I get it. Like, most people pick Florida State, but man, you missed an opportunity there, Nick.
See, how about Seamus though? He went out, made a bold pick. I don't think he knew anything about what he was talking about, but
He knew. He did sound like he knew more than I thought he probably would have. To be honest, like, again, I don't watch wrestling. I'm not a WWE fan, so I'm kind of lost on who Sheamus is, to be honest with you. But like, as somebody that did pick Georgia Tech, like he'll have respect. Now he's still going to be the second most liked wrestler, though, obviously after Roman Reigns. But you know, what can you do there?
I think Nick Saban had like a literal alley-oop.
Yeah, that's what
Georgia Tech. It's just
he kept talking about him yesterday on McAfee's show, and then today on game day, I'm like, is Nick going to do this, or like, are we going to do this right now? But hey, if you want to come and discuss it, Nick Saban, come on the Bleav in Georgia Tech podcast. You're more than welcome. We will be back on Monday. Kind of just we'll go through the game again, just kind of talk about it, kind of put it to bed, and then kind of give an early look to next week. It's a home game. It's a primetime game. Look, after today, I expect the stands to be full. They need to be full. Anything else? Anything we're missing? I don't want to forget anything.
I think we covered it all, but you know, we'll be back. Like, we'll do a more in-depth look at things later in the week. So, you know, I think we got everything.
Okay, well, that will do it for us today. Look, obviously a big day. Everybody enjoy it. Like, you got a lot to be happy about, and then, you know, get ready for Georgia State next week. But before we go, as always, you know, got to mention, if not subscribed to the podcast yet, we would love it if you were. It would mean a lot to us. You know, it's easier. You know, we love making this content for Georgia Tech fans and talking about them. So just subscribe, like the video, just support the channel. That means a lot to us. We love hearing you guys' feedback, the comments, everything. Like, we read a lot of it. Like, we don't. This isn't me going off a script every week. Like, we look at what people say and what we can do better, and we try to do it as much as we can. So, if you listen on podcast form, you know, give us a review: 1, 3, 5 stars, 2 or 4. I never say 2 or 4. If you think it's a 4-star job, make sure you let us know too. And give us a follow. Spreading the gospel of the Bleav in Georgia Tech podcast. We're trying to do the best we can. Anything else, RJ?
I think we covered everything.
All right. We will see you guys next week, and thank you for tuning in.